Some of the most significant events of this century happened last week in China, and the consequences and effects will be felt for decades to come. Because while the world's cameras were fixed on Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un of North Korea standing together at Beijing's biggest military parade in a generation, a spectacle of hypersonic missiles and AI-powered war machines, a quiet but powerful statement was being made. Only 2 African leaders were there, representing an entire continent of over 1.4 billion people. This wasn't just a diplomatic oversight, it was a blaring alarm bell. Africa is watching the birth of a new world order, but we are not fully being represented. This same week, the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline deal was signed. This isn't just about gas, it's the backbone of a new global order, one that's redrawing the world map while Africa seems to be watching from the sidelines. This massive energy corridor is more than just a $34 billion project. It's the launch of a parallel economic system, one that could either be Africa's ticket out of Western dependency or a brand new cage. But here is the part the mainstream media won't tell you. This moment exposes both Africa's biggest weakness and our greatest strength. As Western sanctions push Russia into China's arms, Africa is sitting on the exact resources and leverage that both sides desperately need. We are at the crossroads of this global shift, holding the cards we haven't even begun to play. The parade in Beijing wasn't just for show. It was a funeral for the unipolar world led by Washington. In this new multipolar reality, Africa no longer has to pick one side. The rise of BRICS, with Ethiopia joining the ranks, proves that the game is changing and a new world order is forming. In this episode, we are diving deep into how a gas pipeline in Siberia is shaking up Africa's future, why our leaders' near total absence in Beijing was a calculated move with huge consequences, and most importantly, how we can turn this great power game into Africa's greatest win. Let's break it down. Now, the Power of Siberia 2 isn't just a pipeline. It's a 2,600-kilometer long challenge to Western energy control, and Africa is standing right in the middle of the fallout. When Russia and China announced this deal, they did more than just agree to ship 50 billion cubic meters of gas every year for the next 3 decades. They started rewriting the entire global energy grid. Just think about the numbers. Russia's gas sales to Europe plummeted from 157 billion cubic meters in 2021 to a predicted 39 billion in 2025. That's a massive economic hole, and this pipeline is how Russia plans to fill it by pivoting to China. So, what does a pipeline in Siberia have to do with us here in Africa? The answer is simple: everything. Because this deal creates a powerful energy alliance completely outside of Western control, making both Russia and China more resistant to sanctions. It gives Russia a guaranteed customer and China the energy security it needs to fuel its economic engine, giving it massive leverage in any future trade dispute. This is the exact playbook Russia is quietly running across our continent. Look at the energy deals in the Congo, the nuclear partnerships in the Sahel, and the growing Russian energy presence from North to South Africa. The Power of Siberia 2 is the blueprint, showing how energy is the new currency of geopolitical power. The global energy game is shifting, and the center of gravity is moving east. Africa now faces a critical choice. Do we continue to sell off our vast resources to the highest bidder, or do we start playing the game like Russia and China, using our energy wealth as a tool to build strategic power and secure our own future? While they were signing deals for the next generation, Africa's leaders were making their own calculations, one that will either lock in our prosperity or trap us into a new cycle of dependency and poverty. As Xi Jinping showed off China's most advanced military hardware to the world, with Putin and Kim Jong-un by his side, one question hung in the air over the Tiananmen Square: where was Africa? Out of 26 world leaders who flew in for this historic event, only 2 were from our continent of 54 nations. Zimbabwe's Emerson Mnangagwa and Congo-Brazzaville Denis Sassou Nguesso. That's it. Two men representing 1.4 billion people at what is being called the birth of a new world order. The image was upsetting. Where was Nigeria? Where was South Africa? Where was Kenya? And where was Egypt? These are nations that do a combined $199 billion in trade with China every year. Yet, they were nowhere to be seen. This wasn't about the size of their economies. It was a reward for loyalty. This tells us everything about how this new world order works. It's not just about trade deals. It's about who you can count on when it matters most. So while other African leaders may have stayed home to avoid a bad press of standing with Putin, their absence was noted in Beijing. The message was sent. Africa was in the guest list, but not in the main table. But this quiet presence wasn't just a sign of weakness. It was a strategic choice. And the moves Africa makes next will decide if we become players in this new global order or simply pawns on the board. The parade in Beijing may have featured hypersonic missiles and AI drones, but the real weapon on display was influence and power. And Africa is the ultimate prize. The technology was straight out of what we see in science fiction movies. Dongfeng intercontinental missiles that can hit any city on Earth, 20-meter-long autonomous submarine drones, and stealth loyal wingman drones flying alongside fighter jets. But this isn't just about China's military might. It's about a new security map being drawn with Africa at its center. Let's be clear. Russia is already Africa's biggest arms dealer, supplying 40% of our weapons. From the Sahel to the Horn of Africa, Russian mercenaries, now rebranded as the African Corps, are providing security for governments in Mali, Burkina Faso, and the Central African Republic. These aren't just commercial contrasts. They are deep-seated strategic alliances. Meanwhile, China is expanding its own military presence. Its naval base in Djibouti was just the start. Beijing is now positioning itself as a major security partner for the continent of Africa. And this same country, showing off AI warfare in its capital, is offering to train and equip our African armies. This puts African leaders in a tough spot. The parade in Beijing was more than just a spectacle. It was an invitation to join a new security club. Standing next to Xi, Putin, and Kim Jong-un is a clear statement about whose protection you are choosing. But here's the deeper issue. As these global powers flex their military muscle in a competition for our continent, Africa still lacks the power to secure itself. We risk becoming the battleground for their ambitions. The advanced weapons in Beijing show us the future of war. The question for Africa isn't just about buying this technology, but whether we can finally build the capacity to control our own destiny. Africa now faces a stark choice. Either become the tough for a new great power play or build the strength to set our own terms. Now, let me clear something up because this is the funny part of the story. Because Donald Trump completely broke down as this event were unfolding in China. Trump ranted on social media that India had been lost to deepest, darkest China. He wasn't reading the room. He was missing the entire play. Because what Prime Minister Narendra Modi is doing right now is not betrayal. It's a masterclass in modern geopolitics. And Africa should be taking notes. Picture this. At the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in China, just before the military parade, three global heavyweights, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Narendra Modi, are seen having a relaxed informal chat. That image alone says everything. Narendra Modi, who had just been slapped with 50% tariff by Donald Trump himself for buying Russian oil, was now standing side by side with China's president and Russia's top man. Here's the strategy. India doesn't pick sides. It plays all of them. It buys 40% of its oil from Russia, despite US warnings. It trades over $125 billion with China, even with their ongoing border tensions, and at the same time, is a core member of the US-led Quad Alliance. This isn't chaos, it's calculation. It's called strategic autonomy through multi-alignment, and it's working. India-China trade just surged to $65 billion, proving that even under pressure, independent diplomacy thrives. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Just days after rubbing shoulders with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was on the phone with EU leaders discussing peace in Ukraine. So while Donald Trump still struggles to get Putin on the line, Modi is in regular contact with both Moscow and Kyiv. In fact, EU leaders Antonio Costa and Ursula von der Leyen openly said that India has a key role to play in ending the war in Ukraine. They even praised India's continued dialogue with President Zelensky, positioning Modi as the mediator the world needs. And the irony, Trump's America-first isolationism may have just handed Modi the global peace broker role Donald Trump has always craved. Modi isn't shouting on social media. He's quietly building bridges that could win him the Nobel Peace Prize, something that Donald Trump is desperately demanding for. Now let's bring it home to Africa, because this isn't just an Indian story. It's a blueprint for African sovereignty in a multipolar world. Ethiopia just joined the BRICS while keeping its Western partnerships. South Africa hosts both BRIC and the AGOA summit, balancing East and West like a pro. So no, refusing to take sides isn't weak, it's strategy. And if Africa followed this same playbook, we don't have to be pawns in anyone's power struggle. We can be the bridge, the broker, and the balance, and maybe the biggest winner in all of this global game. So while China and Russia were celebrating their $34 billion pipeline deal, Africa was sitting on a treasure chest of its own. Over $400 billion in sovereign wealth funds and another $1.1 trillion in domestic capital. That's enough to make us kingmakers in this new world order, not just spectators. The Power of Siberia too is the perfect blueprint. Russia used its gas to lock in a 30-year, $400 billion strategic partnership. That pipeline isn't just moving energy, it's creating permanent economic ties that translate into pure geopolitical power. Africa has the resources to do this 10 times over. We control 60% of the world's cobalt and 70% of its platinum, the minerals essential for the green energy revolution. We have massive untapped potential in solar, wind, and hydropower, plus huge new gas discoveries from Mozambique to Senegal. Our ultimate trump card is the African Continental Free Trade Area, a single market of over 1.5 billion people with a GDP set to hit nearly 7 trillion by 2035. Now, this is our foundation for building our own Power of Africa energy corridors. Imagine a trans-Saharan pipeline to Europe, but built on our own terms, with 30-year commitment. Picture renewable energy networks across Southern Africa, powering our very own industrial boom. Our $400 billion in sovereign wealth fund should be financing this game-changing project, not just sitting on foreign bank accounts. We need to take a lesson from Norway's $1.7 trillion fund, but with a strategic twist. Use our resource wealth to build permanent partnerships that can't be threatened by sanctions. Here's our advantage. Every global power needs Africa. China needs our minerals for its green tech. America and Europe need an alternative to Chinese supply chains. Russia needs sanction-proof partners. The world is competing for our favor. The Power of Siberia too will secure Russia and China's future for the next 30 years. Africa has the power to build a dozen such partnerships right now. The only question is, do we have the vision to use it before others write the rules for us? So while Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un were toasting to their new alliance in Beijing, 7,000 miles away, Donald Trump was having a complete meltdown on Truth Social. Looks like we've lost India and Russia to deepest and darkest China, he posted in a message that quickly became a global meme. His reaction was a mess of contradictions. First, he called it a conspiracy. Then, he called the parade very, very impressive before admitting they were hoping I was watching. The irony was thick. Donald Trump boasts about his great relationships with these leaders, yet here they were, forming an alliance that directly challenges him. His own America-first policies and trade wars were pushing them together. As one CNN analyst puts it, Trump is making US foes great again. Meanwhile, in Europe, it was pure panic. Bloomberg's headline said it all. Europe left in the cold as Russia deepens gas ties with China. The EU has just threatened more sanctions, and this pipeline deal was Beijing and Moscow's way of saying, your sanctions don't work anymore. We have our own systems now. Western confusion was obvious. NATO didn't know how to respond. The BBC was running specials asking if this was a new world order. The real fear in Washington and Brussels wasn't just about a parade or a pipeline. It was the terrifying realization that their favorite tools of power, sanctions, tariffs, and military threats, were not only failing, but they were actually backfiring, driving their biggest rivals closer together. Now, for Africa, this meltdown in the West is a golden opportunity. When the old powers are confused and reactive, it creates space for new powers to rise and write their own rules. Donald Trump's tantrums and Europe's anxiety are symptoms of a bigger truth. The West is struggling to adapt to a world where they are no longer the only game in town. Now, as Donald Trump tweets threats, China builds pipelines, and Russia sells weapons, Africa is now standing at the most important crossroads since the dawn of independence. There are three possible futures for us here in Africa. The first is strategic autonomy. We follow the Indian model, using our collective power through the African Continental Free Trade Area to negotiate with all sides as equals. We join BRICS, but we strengthen the African Union. We build our own energy corridors and use our mineral wealth as leverage. The second future is fragmentation. Different regions of Africa align with different powers. West Africa's ECOWAS sticks with France and the EU as AES consolidates alliance with Russia and China. East Africa deepens its ties with China, and Southern Africa tries to play the middle. We get short-term gains but lose our long-term continental power. The third option and most dangerous future is a new dependency. We simply swap one master for another. Our resources still flows out. The big decisions are still made in foreign capitals. The Power of Siberia too shows us the path to real power. Russia didn't just sell gas, it built a permanent partnership. Africa needs to do the same. Our playbook is clear. Use the AFCFTA as our united front. Pool our sovereign wealth funds to finance our own mega project and build strategic partnerships that gives us a permanent seat at the global table. Success means the AFCFTA becoming a 6.7 trillion economic powerhouse, lifting millions out of poverty and using our resources to generate over $500 billion in new revenue annually. The Power of Siberia 2 pipeline will shape the world for the next 30 years. The question for us is simple. Will Africa spend these 3 decades building our own pipelines to prosperity, or will we be stuck on the sidelines watching others run the world? The choice is ours, but the clock is ticking, and it is ticking fast. Now, if you have watched to this point, this is Frontline Africa, where we talk about geopolitics from Africa's point of view, where we talk about geopolitics as it affects us here, right here in Africa. If you want to see more of my videos, maybe consider to subscribe and turn up those notifications so that when next we post our videos, you have the chance to see what is happening in Africa and the motherland. I am your host, Ezekiel Enejeta, and I will see you in the next one. It's a bye-bye for now.